Hi, I'm Stephen Feinberg, Executive Director of the Rhode Island Film and Television Office. Our guest tonight is a phenomenal producer. She's worked on such projects as Infinitely Polar Bear with Mark Ruffalo and Zoe Saldana, The Polka King with Jack Black, Discovery with Robert Redford, Jason Segel, and Rooney Mara. I want to welcome Erika Hampson to the table here at Double Feature. Hi, Erika.
Hi, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing great. Where are you, in New York right now?
I'm in my apartment in New York City. Yeah.
Well, now, just so the folks know, Eric is originally from Cumberland, Rhode Island. We met on Infinitely Polar Bear. That was being directed by Maya Forbes and her husband, Wally Wolodarski. And we forged a friendship. I don't know what year that might have been. Do you know what year that was?
Yeah, I think it was probably 10 years ago.
Wow, 10 years ago. And then after that, you worked on the Discovery. Oh, Measure of a Man with Donald Sutherland was another film that you did here. How did you even get involved in the film industry, Erika?
I think I was lucky. I graduated from Boston College and moved to New York with three of my roommates, and just happened to be walking past a production one day where a PA had quit. I needed a job. They needed an assistant. So got my foot in the door that way. And then, from there, learned about this show, Law and Order, Criminal Intent, that was going to start shooting. So, got a production assistant job on that. And then became Vincent D'Onofrio's personal assistant.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he decided to write and direct a movie that he was going to self-finance and shoot at his property in Kingston, New York, and he let me produce it. And it's a tiny $100,000 movie that we shot over the course of 12 days. I was in control of the money. Figured I'd go back to assisting him after that was over, but I think, as tends to happen a lot in this business, I met people on that set who had a movie that they were going to shoot, in Boston. So then I did that, and then met someone on that set who had a movie in New York. And so I really fell into it by accident, and suddenly was a line producer.
When you went to, is it BU? Is that where you said you went, BU?
BC.
BC. Were you studying film at that time, or what were you majoring in?
Yeah, I was studying communications.
Okay.
I wanted to be a writer, but I think more along the lines of a journalist than a filmmaker. But then I took a film course junior year where we got to write and film and then edit our own projects, and kind of fell in love with it and decided to make a shift.
Oh, wow. And then, this business is so, networking is so prevalent. And I always thought, when I was growing up, I always thought networking was, I don't know. I like to make friends just to make friends, not with any ulterior motive. But I realized over time, networking is just about making friendships and looking out for each other. And if you're like-minded, if you're positive energy, enthusiastic, a team player, collaborative, responsible, good things happen, right? You get these other opportunities come your way.
Yeah, it's really true. I think, like, on every movie set, I meet a lot of friends, 3 or 4 people who I'll probably carry with me for life. And, a lot of those folks I get to work with more than once.
Right.
They'll come to me if they have another project. So yeah, I agree. I think, you can network and still make friends. Like, those things can go hand in hand.
Right. So when you were doing your PA work and doing these different things, did you have a long-range plan for yourself, or were you just trying to figure it out?
Yeah, I was just trying to make money and pay rent.
Right.
And, I did know that I liked it enough. PAing is really hard. You're at the bottom of the food chain. You don't make a lot of money. You work really long hours. And so I think if you can do that job and decide that you like it, it means you are probably meant to be in this business in some capacity. But I certainly didn't know what I wanted to do. So I think my career kind of found me.
So then when you started Vincent D'Onofrio, actually the first time I ever saw him was a student film at USC. When I was going to USC Film School, he was in that film. and he was a young actor just getting started. When you were in charge of the money, how did that come about? I'm the money man or the money woman.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's because he trusted me. I've been working with him at that point for a few years. It was his own personal money, $100,000 of his own money, and so I think that was it. It's just he knew that I would do right by him and keep us on budget, and I did. I took it very seriously. So I didn't at the time really even understand the difference between like a producer and a line producer.
Yep.
So I just knew that I couldn't go over budget because I didn't want to lose my job.
Yep. What about, did you have any mentors at all as you were getting involved in the industry?
Not when I was a PA, but when I jumped up to produce his movie,
Yeah.
I was able to sort of we shot it during the hiatus, the summer months, between seasons for Criminal Intent. So this guy Mike Smith, who was the first AD, and Mary Ray Thulis, she was the UPM at the time. Like I was able to call them, at any given moment and ask what I now realize are very kind of basic, silly questions, but they never made me feel stupid and would always kind of give me the answer. So I'd hang up with them and then act like I knew what I was talking about to the crew. And then when I started jumping up, I mean, one of the first movies that I did, I think it was like $1 million. It was in Boston. It was my first union movie. And Robin Reitman, who's, an amazing accountant and also from Rhode Island, she was a huge mentor for me because she really kind of taught me how to budget. I had never used the budgeting software that you're supposed to use for movies. Like she really took me under her wing and taught me a lot of what I know today.
Oh, that's great. Robin I've known since childhood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Oh, no. Since I remember the first time I met Robin, she was hanging upside down in a tree. I swear to God. So you and I met. You were producing a movie, Infinitely Polar Bear, with Mark Ruffalo and Zoe Saldana. It was being directed by Maya Forbes. It was an autobiographical story, and her husband, Wally Wolodarski. I think they were co-directing, right? Co-directing that film?
No, that one, it was just, I think they maybe co-wrote. She was the only credited director, but I mean, they're a husband-wife team.
They're a tandem, yeah. Now, how did you get involved in that show?
That was actually a little bit because of Vincent. Vincent had just done this movie with this company, Paper Street, and then Paper Street paired up with Park Pictures to make this movie, Infinitely Polar Bear. And so I think they kind of heard, the guys at Paper Street heard my name through him. And they put me up for the job. At that point, I knew everyone at Park Pictures. Sam Bisbee was one of the producers on the movie that Vincent wrote and directed. So he kind of vouched for me, and I met Maya and Wally, and we all got along. So I got hired for the job, and I think it certainly helped that they were wanting to shoot in Rhode Island, and I was from Rhode Island, even though I was living in New York at the time. So it all kind of came together.
And that's a really great film, and. Well, you guys, that's a story about, and Mark played. What was he had? He was bipolar.
Yeah, bipolar, and it shows really kind of what that can do to a family. And it was done in a very kind of good, sensitive, loving way.
And then Zoe's character was dealing with. Racial issues and trying to get a job, and I just thought they did such a wonderful job together, and it was, like you said, it was handled very delicately and nicely, and I really, one of the things that I noticed, having worked with you and working on 20 productions just here, 20 years of productions here in Rhode Island, what I found is that your crew loves working for you or with you, and you create a nice atmosphere and dynamic. But everyone I ever talk to, I love working with Erika. I love working with Erika. That's got to be a nice feeling.
Yeah, it's a very nice feeling. It's certainly better than hearing that people hate me.
They hate me.
Although
We
I'm sure
hate
they
her.
have some.
Right. No, I've heard that too for on other projects. I've heard that on other projects. I'm sure you know, like there sometimes a crew will not like a producer, and sometimes that can happen. You've worked with Maya and Wally on several films, right?
Yeah, we followed Infinitely Polar Bear up with this movie, The Polka King, which we also shot in Rhode Island
With Jack
with Jack
Black.
Black.
Yep.
Yeah, which was a lot of fun. We based out of Pawtucket
Yep.
mostly.
Yep.
And then they brought me on board this other movie that it was called The Good House with Sigourney Weaver, and we shot it up in Nova Scotia.
And
That was,
Kevin Kline too, wasn't he in it as well?
yep, Kevin Kline. We did it, I think we like in the fall before the pandemic. So
Yeah.
I
I
guess that
know
would
we
have been,
were trying to bring that movie to Rhode Island, but I didn't have enough tax incentives at the time.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
And we tried to just keep it in Massachusetts. They really kind of wanted to keep it in New England. I think, at that point, they had fallen in love with the crew in New England and really wanted to bring work back. But it just financially, because of the dollar exchange in Canada, it kind of didn't work out. The studio sort of said,
Yeah.
you have to go up north. So we did.
Are the do you guys have another film lined up with them? Anything upcoming?
No, not that I know of. I mean, I think they kind of make a movie once every, 3 to 5 years, and so I certainly hope. So we're coming up on actually that time period. I should reach out, but I would love to work with them again.
We would love to have you come back to Rhode Island to work with them as well. They're Wally's a character. They're such nice people, and
Yeah.
they have a nice demeanor about them. Then you also did one of the films, The Discovery, with Rooney Mara and Robert Redford and Jason Segel. Who, how was that experience? Can you talk about that a little bit?
That experience was probably one of the best that I've ever had in my career, and I think the crew would agree as well. It was just one of those really special movies where everyone just kind of came together, had fun, worked really hard, but we really just kind of felt like a film family, and we were shooting in Newport in the off season. So I was living in Newport. I'm never going to complain if I'm being put up by the beach.
Right.
And, it was like mostly one location. So it was very contained and easy from a production standpoint. It's just, I remember at the wrap party, everyone, and even, a couple years later when I went back to do another movie, like people would always just say like, man, that was such a great experience. And I don't know, it really was like the cast and the crew hung out together. I feel very lucky to have had that experience because, making movies, it's hard. So it's especially rewarding when you can have fun.
And that was that became a Netflix movie, and Charlie McDowell was the director of that, and he's the son of Mary Steenburgen and Malcolm McDowell.
Yeah, and the stepson of Ted Danson. So that was also fun because Mary was in the movie. So then like Ted was around for part of it with her. So he, Charlie had his family with him. And so, yeah, it was great.
Yeah, well, I remember we had a great screening at the Jane Pickens Theater. And then you recently did the Whitney Houston film, I Want to Dance with Somebody. How was that? That was, I thought you did a phenomenal job on that film. It was big.
It was very big. It was by far the biggest movie that I've ever produced. So it was big in terms of money, but big in terms of scope as well. A lot of background actors recreating all of her concert scenes, visual effects. I mean, for me, it was great because I learned a lot on that film, and it was a challenging movie. But yeah, I'm proud of it.
I think you should be. I remember seeing it, and I think I either called you or texted you right away. It was really beautifully done, and I was just in awe, especially at the recreations that you had to do. And were you having to deal with a lot of research on that? Were you guys having to do a lot of research on how you were going to make things happen? And it was all filmed in Boston, right?
It was filmed in Boston. We had a stage in Quincy Marina Studios, which was, fantastic to have use of that space. And yeah, I mean, there was a lot of research. I mean, I think a lot of people on the movie were at an age where they grew up, listening to her
Sure.
music. So a lot of the crew was already very familiar with her. And the other thing is that we had Clive Davis and the Houston family on board as producers. So we were able to tap into a lot of, her backstory and ask questions of them, which definitely helped. But I know like Jerry Sullivan, our production designer, he did a ton of research to be able to accurately recreate, a lot of the sets and the concert pieces. So he had a very big job on his hands and he knocked it out of the park.
It was just incredible. When you're dealing, a lot of times, Erika, you're dealing on an independent film level, right? As far as not all your productions are studio productions. How do you get involved as a producer? Are you finding scripts? Are you developing projects yourself? Are you a gun for hire? Like, how do you typically get involved in a production? And are there projects you're developing?
For the most part, I'm a gun for hire.
Okay.
I'm brought in by a studio or an independent producer once they have a script that's pretty solid. Sometimes there's already cast attached. There's always money attached, and then I just kind of come in and do my thing. There are a couple movies that I've helped not so much develop, but like been with from the very beginning. I did this movie Passing, which Rebecca Hall wrote and directed and acted in, and that's a movie that I had been attached to, for years. I met her in Massachusetts on this movie Tumble Down, and she was talking about that movie back then. And then, me, Rebecca, and Margot Hand, who's a producer, really kind of fought to bring it to life. Mm-hmm. But that's probably one of the only examples I could cite. I'm not really a developing producer type.
Yep. And so when you get a script, tell me, what's the process? You get a script. Do you get a lot of scripts that are do people say, oh, you're a Hollywood producer? Oh, I love. Do you get a lot of people submitting scripts or trying to get scripts to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who are like trying to get into the industry. And so they'll reach out and ask if I'll read and give advice or if I can kind of point them in the right direction. And then I also do get a lot of scripts from studios.
Yep.
that want either a budget for a movie to know how much it would cost if they wanted to greenlight it, or just scripts that turn into offers for jobs. I mean, certainly not so much lately because of the strike,
right.
But yeah, normally in a year where 2 unions weren't on strike, I get probably 4 or 5 scripts a week.
And just so you folks know, we probably wouldn't have her on the show because she wouldn't be available. She's usually working all the time. The strike's actually been to our advantage. Thank you very much. When you're doing a budget, so some films, let's say it was a drama, but you don't know who's your cast. Does the cast sometimes drive what the budget can be? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think, if there's not cast attached, you sort of make assumptions based on the overall budget that the studio or the financier is wanting you to hit. So if it's a smaller movie, you're just not really going to be able to pay your actors a ton of money, regardless of who they are. So yeah, and then certainly when actors start getting attached to scripts, if they're very valuable, then oftentimes the studio will say like, okay, we can raise things by $1 million or, whatever the number is.
Right.
Because it's all, it's a money game. So,
yep.
They, depending on how much money they think they're going to make back, which oftentimes is due to the cast that's attached, like that determines sort of what I'm trying to back into.
When you're, I was just talking to a friend of mine who's a studio executive. He's a vice president of production. And he said, typically we try to get 2 pages a day. I said, I think in the independent world, it's a little different. How many pages a day are you trying to get in typically on an average?
On an indie film?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be anywhere from 4 to 8. I mean, 8 is super aggressive. I would put it more at like 4 to 6.
Yep.
Because that's the thing. If you don't have a lot of money, then you don't get a lot of days,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of shooting days. And so you're really trying to pack everything in. So yeah.
When you're doing a film on an independent film, are you encouraging using one camera or 2 cameras?
I always budget for 2. You know, I think the day can go a lot faster with 2 cameras.
Yep.
But then, you know, at that point, I sort of leave it up to the director and the first AD and the DP. Like once they start shot listing and figure out how they're going to cover the scenes, like
Yep.
they let me know if they want to utilize the B cam every day or not.
Do you find that most of the filmmakers are using 1 or 2 cameras typically?
I mean, the movies that I do, 2 is the minimum. I mean, on the Whitney Houston movie, which is, you know, an exception to the rule, I think we had always 3 cameras going, and there were times that we had,
5?
you know, or 5, yeah, for the concert scenes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think 2 cameras is pretty typical these days.
Yep. Are you involved at all in the casting process? Do you get involved in that aspect?
I mean, not really in a creative manner. It's more like, you know, if my budget, if my budget assumes that we're going to hire, you know, that we can only bring in 3 actors from New York if we're shooting in Rhode Island, like everything sort of has to be run by me if they want to go outside of that.
Yeah.
And then once we decide who we're casting, I'm certainly involved in, you know, helping to make their deals.
Yeah.
But I'm not sort of choosing the actors that we're going to put in front of the directors.
Right. So and for an audience, because when you're doing the hiring of an actor who might be from New York and they're coming to Rhode Island, you have to pay them their hotel, a vehicle probably, per diem, right? Per week, you're giving them X amount of dollars. And what other expenditures do you have?
I mean,
those are the ones, right?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. So are there particular parts of the process that you really do enjoy on a production? Is it pre-production, the production itself, post-production, trying to get money?
Yeah, no. You know, it's all hard. I mean, the most enjoyable moment I think is, you know, when you see the movie at the premiere or on TV and you're proud of it and you can sort of justify having spent, you know, 4 or 5 months of your life making the movie. But yeah, it's just, I mean, you know, I don't know. It's not necessarily that I enjoy it, but like the prep period is where I devote a lot of my attention. I mean, I think it's, you know, probably the most important part of filmmaking. If you prep a movie correctly, then the shoot is going to go, you know, a lot better for all involved. But yeah, it's hard work.
Now, do you have any particular projects that you love to do? Like, do you prefer a romantic comedy? Do you prefer a drama, suspense? Are there certain projects that you love more than others, or as far as genre, or are there certain genres that you're looking forward to doing that you haven't done?
No, I mean, I'm not a rom-com person. Like I don't love predictable formulaic films. I just like good content, you know, and these days, you know, the script is obviously very important to me, but it's also the people who are involved and where it's going to be shooting. Like those are kind of the 3 things that factor into the projects that I choose to spend my time working on. But like my taste in movies is I like kind of weird, nonlinear, like Memento and, you know, Go, Donnie Darko, like stranger kind of films.
Yeah. Have you had any opportunities to film in any exotic places?
Yeah, I mean, you know, not so much exotic. I've shot in Canada a bunch, Spain, Colombia.
Oh.
I did a cruise ship movie where we were on a ship for 2 weeks and we would get off at every sort of port and film. So that was like Haiti, Jamaica.
Wow.
You know, a lot of the Caribbean islands. So I guess that's a little exotic.
What kind of crew would you get? Would you bring in crew on a production like that?
Yeah, so it was a weird movie. We started in New York and we did 5 weeks here, and then we went to Florida and did 2 days there, and then we hopped on the ship. And so we like with New York, that was our local crew, and then we took the department heads with us to Florida and then crewed up locally. And then the ship, because it was an actual like operating ship with like 6,000 people who were paying to be on vacation, so we had to be very aware of that.
Wow.
We had a really tiny crew. I mean, I think they gave us like 25 rooms, and that included the cast. So it was bare bones. But it was people that we brought from New York, and some of them from Florida actually came with us.
Wow. What was the name of that film?
It was called Like Father, and it's with Kristen Bell and Seth Rogen and Kelsey Grammer. And Seth's wife, Lauren, directed it and wrote it.
Oh, wow. And were there a lot of looky-loos on, you're on a ship, right?
Yeah, well, we got lucky. I mean, lucky is not really the right word, but the we got hit by Hurricane Irma.
Okay.
We had to actually evacuate, and then got onto the ship a couple days late. And because of that, a lot of people canceled their vacation for that first week. So the first
Oh,
week we had our run of the ship.
oh,
The
that's
second
good.
week, everybody came on, and yes, I mean we had to have security with us, and there were definitely a lot of looking loose.
Yeah.
But I mean that's kind of no matter where you shoot a movie, you're always going to have that.
And would you use their dining facilities and all that stuff, so you knew that you had a nice commissary, so to speak?
Yeah, it was sort of, we paid like one price to Royal Caribbean, and that included our rooms on the ship, and it was breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then we shot all over the ship, in a way, it's a little bit of a commercial for for Royal
Yeah. Now I
Caribbean.
want to go on a cruise ship. I'm ready to go.
There we go.
That's funny. What are you working on now? Anything in particular that you've got going on right now? Because I
Yeah,
know the
no.
strike, or was there anything that you were working on when the strike hit?
I mean, I was attached to this movie. It was going to be a sequel to Dirty Dancing with Jennifer Grey that was going to shoot in Atlanta. And, it needed a rewrite before we could officially go into prep. And it was like just as everyone was talking about the fact that the writers were most likely going to strike.
Mm,
So the studio hit the pause button. So, I mean, I'm lucky in that I'm still getting asked to do a lot of budgets for studios because I think they're wanting to line up content for when everything is resolved
yep.
with SAG. But no, I mean, I have a movie that's coming out in a couple weeks called Quiz Lady.
Tell
Disney
us
has put
about it.
it's Sandra Oh and Aquafina, Will Ferrell are in it. It's a comedy. The two ladies play sisters that kind of go on a road trip, and Aquafina ends up on a Jeopardy like TV show that Will Ferrell is the host of, kind
Sounds
of
like
like the
fun.
Alex Trebek character. So it's good. We shot it in New Orleans
Oh, wow.
maybe like a year and a half ago.
Wow. Now, what's it like filming, or how is it different? Do you film, you have filmed in New York City. You've filmed in, you just mentioned New Orleans, you filmed in Rhode Island, Vancouver. Are there differences when you're doing a production in a different location, or are you just in a cocoon? The production is the production. Like, do you feel the differences of the areas that you're making your movies in?
Yeah, I mean, there's always sort of a different vibe, to every location that I'm shooting at. And there are differences. I don't necessarily know in the way that a crew would feel, but like for me, in the way that I have to budget, like each area has different rules, different rates. They kind of do things in their own way.
Yeah.
So, if it's a place that I'm going into that I've never worked at before, I usually have to do a little bit of homework to get up to speed and kind of know what the lay of the land is there.
Yeah. Do you have any particular preferences of where you prefer to film?
I mean, I love shooting in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. My family, still lives in Cumberland, and I have a place in Narragansett, so it's always nice,
Yeah.
to feel like I'm working at home. And then I like working in the city, New York City as well, for the same reason. It's nice to sleep in my own bed at night. But outside of those places, I really love Vancouver a lot, and I love New Orleans. Those are two of probably my favorite places to.
Have you filmed in Atlanta?
I haven't. The closest I got to it was scouting for that Dirty Dancing movie.
Oh,
but no, I've never had the opportunity.
Yeah. What about do you have any interest in directing at all, or do you want to stay in the producing area?
I think, I've accepted at this point in my career that my strong suit is what I'm doing. It's exec producing, line producing. My brain just doesn't really work in a way where I think I would be good as a director. So
How
I'd stay
so?
in
What do you mean?
I just think that, like, I don't know, when it comes to like solving, like a story issue, or, on the day being able to, I think, maneuver, like, if a certain story beat is not working, to come up with a different way to do it. And, and also just in terms of like the way you have to be able to talk to the actors to get a performance out of them. It's like, that's just sort of not, I like watching people do it well, but like, I don't know that I would have that skill set. So I'm happy where I'm at.
What's your favorite part of producing?
I think it's just the day-to-day solving of problems and feeling, like a useful part of the machine. So it's always nice to help the director sort of bring his or her vision to life. And, I like being one of the people that gets to be in the room doing that.
Yeah. Do you typically encourage or not a director to have rehearsals? Is it sometimes not even a feasible idea because of your budget constraints? What do you find? Is it something that's great, not great?
I find it to be helpful if the director and the cast can get together, just to sort of get like the first day jitters out of the way, before we're going to camera. It helps for them to sort of find their character, I think. And, so a lot of times they want to block ahead of time so that we're not wasting time on the day. So if the director is someone who likes to rehearse, I always find room in the budget to make that happen. Yeah. I've worked with some directors who have just zero interest in it. It's, they would rather be raw and figure it out on the day.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times it does come down to just actor availability. A lot of actors are super busy and just can't come, a week early to give that time to the production. So that oftentimes dictates kind of what we are and are not able to do.
Are you the one who would it be your position or the director's position? Let's say an actor came in and they came in that night and they got fit for wardrobe and their hair, whatever. And then they're supposed to start, the next day or the next night. Let's say they came in on a Saturday and they're supposed to start on Monday. Mm-hmm. Would you then like encourage the director to take them out to dinner? Would you go out with them? Like, what would be something that you would think of doing as the producer?
Yeah, I think it would certainly be, I would encourage the director, to take them out for dinner or a drink, just to sort of get a feel for each other, especially if they've never worked together or met before. I normally do end up having dinner with the cast, but not right out of the gate. We kind of let everybody settle in, and then we usually do like a producer, director, cast dinner once everyone's a bit more comfortable with each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think if an actor's flying in on a Saturday night, I'm paying for a bunch of the crew to be working on a Sunday, because you do want to make sure that they've had their fitting and that hair and makeup has looked at them before they're going to camera on Monday.
Yeah. And do you work with particular tell me about the distribution process? You've done this film. Does it always have a distributor when you start, or are you finding a distributor after? And we're talking about whether it's theatrical or streaming or different territories. International, domestic. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's where you really see the difference between independent films and studio films. Like the movie that I did in New Orleans, we knew right from the start that it was going to be theatrical. We knew that Disney was going to put it out. Same thing with the Whitney Houston movie. We knew that Sony was putting it out. Indie movies oftentimes don't have that luxury. You're making a movie with the hope that you're going to get into a film festival, that it's going to get attention, that someone's going to want to buy it, and then put it out on their platform. So it's a much bigger risk, I think, to make an indie movie because there's no guarantee that the world's going to get to see it.
Do you get involved at all in the distribution process? Do you try to help out earlier on and try to find distribution, or is that not your
Yeah,
thing?
that's not really my wheelhouse. It's I'm certainly still involved with the group that's trying to find the distribution, so I'm always in the know about what's happening. But my job is pretty much like once the movie, once principal photography has wrapped, I'm always around to answer questions, but I then sort of hand it off to post production, and then the next time I see everybody is usually at the premiere.
Okay, so you're not following through even with post production. That's like a post production supervisor.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I made this one movie actually in Baton Rouge maybe 6 months ago, and I wasn't a line producer on that. I was a producer, and so I'm following that through. Like we're about to finish the director's cut, and then we're going to be submitting to festivals. So that's kind of for me the rare exception to the rule. But most times I'm turning things over to the post soup.
Now, who's handling the distribution to a festival? So let's say it goes to post and everything's done. Then what would happen? Like,
Yeah,
who's
then
organizing? Who's organizing? Trying to get them into festivals.
it's the creative producers, or oftentimes the financier of the indie movie. They're the ones who are kind of making the phone calls. They're trying to find a sales agent. Like they're doing all the legwork to try to get the movie into the festival.
Yeah. Like when we went to Sundance for Infinitely Polar Beer. So is that Maya and Wally's doing, or was that they had J.J. Abrams was also an executive producer on that? Do you think that was his doing?
No, I mean, having his name attached to that movie certainly didn't hurt anything, but it was Sam Bisbee and Thea Dunlap who were part of part of Park Pictures,
Yep.
and then the guys at Paper Street. They also, those two companies combined were doing all the work to get it in.
It's interesting, really, because a lot of people will watch a film and they'll see 4 different producers or 3 different producers and different companies. And what does this one do? What does this one do? You're mostly dealing with the actual filming, right? You're getting that film done. And so it's the quality everybody was hoping for. And then there's another producer that's handling post-production maybe, and another one handling distribution. Maybe it was another producer that was developing it. That's kind of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
There's many phases to making a movie. So yeah, I mean, you're right. A lot of people are involved.
Yeah. Is there anything you would want to share, Erika? You've had so many great experiences with so many really talented people. Anything you would want to share with maybe an audience member who's very interested in being in the film and TV industry?
I would say just work really hard. I think if you're a hard worker, somebody is gonna notice it and notice the potential in you. And if you can get your foot in the door, that's it's really all you need. You can work your way up the ladder. I mean, that's the thing that I really do like about this business is that, there is a lot of room for growth for people who want to climb higher. So
And be very enthusiastic and responsible, a team player, collaborate, happy. I mean, filmmaking, sometimes the hours are very long and challenging, but you want to be in a foxhole as someone who's pleasant to be around and you can count on, right?
yeah, I think like kindness is so very important, in this business. So just be kind, surround yourself with kind people, who have, a calm vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Hours are long.
you have the calmest vibe, and as I said, people say, I love Erika. I love working for and with Erika. And when I would hear that was like, okay, because I love working with you too. And to hear that from others, you represent yourself so well, your family. I know when your mom, dad would go down to the set and they were so proud of you, and they're such nice people. And I just want to thank you so much for being an outstanding friend, a a super talented producer, and really representing the best of our community. And you always leave a location in the same condition or better than when you found it. There's no bad vibes when Erika Hampson is on location. It's all good stuff. So I want to thank you so much for all your work. I look forward to the future work that you're going to do. And thank you so much for being on Double Feature tonight.
Thanks, Steve. I admire everything you're doing, and I adore you. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Yep.